This is the EPOCH update, and we'll be reviewing the 4 articles I published this week. Starting with one based on the movie The Visitor, which is a sci-fi movie, and I noticed that it contains biblical themes as well as stuff that seem to be Illuminati themes. So to start, it mentions a battle in space somewhere between Satine and Commander Yahweh. So I was like, okay, that's nothing you need to read into. It's pretty straightforward. Satan and God, okay. So that was interesting to start with. And basically, there's a woman on Earth, one left, who can reproduce, or rather produce babies with Satine's genetics. So there's a group of elitists who offer a man wealth in exchange for producing children with her. So you see there a type of bloodlines concept. And while there's a lot of neat little things to pick up on in this movie, including the concept of programmed killers and all this kind of stuff. So check that out. Then I posted another in the series dealing with Michael Heiser, the ancient languages researcher, and we're discussing what angels look like, what cherubs look like, what seraphs look like, what watchers look like, because if there's ever a topic where there's a lot of confusion and misunderstanding, lack of knowledge, it's this area of what do these beings look like. And I could guarantee you that if you were to get on a search engine in the images section and look up the word angel, I guarantee you that 99.9% of it would be inaccurate. So that's what that article deals with. Then there's a continuing series in which I reply directly to an atheist who wrote a reply to me and dedicated a podcast to me and was kind enough actually to tell me about it. So in this case, we're dealing with what I refer to as biblical free thinking. Now, of course, there's always the issue of definitions and who gets to define terms and what is the appropriate definition. And I always like to note that there's grammatical definitions, philosophical definitions, scientific definitions, theological definitions. There's all kinds of definitions. But for some reason, when it comes to atheist versus Christian debates, atheists sort of like to think that languages do not evolve anymore and they're set in stone, and whatever the dictionary doeth, saith, then that's what we must go with. And in a manner of speaking, I agree to a certain extent because, of course, we need to agree on words to have any kind of conversation. And if we didn't, you wouldn't understand what I was saying. So the issue is that words change meanings as time goes by, and they're also able to be understood differently. For example, my concept of biblical free thinking is that if you're a materialist or a naturalist, so basically just about every single atheist there is, you by necessity have to keep your brain locked up tightly in a quaint little box of materialism and naturalism. You can't allow your thoughts to go beyond that unless you don't want to be an atheist anymore, right? So the Bible allows me to follow the evidence where it leads. So for instance, if, I don't know, I believe that well, who knows what, that God set up a wedding between H and 2O, but then I realize it's a natural process, then I can conclude that it's a natural process based on the nature that God created in the first place. That's kind of a very, very, very simplistic example, but that's one of the concepts or one of the ways to understand what I'm getting at. So check out that article. And the last one deals with a Meet the Press segment that I saw where, as usual, nobody can seem to discuss Islamic terrorism without bringing up Christianity for some odd reason, right? Because they're discussing Islamic terrorism they get uncomfortably close to having to admit some of the statements made very plainly in the Quran, and then all of a sudden they have to take a diversionary tactic and say, but what about Christians? Yeah, Christians do, the Bible too, yeah. So in this case, it was the issue of Breivik, the Scandinavian man who mass murdered a bunch of people in a terrorist act, and the Muslims stating, why didn't Christian leaders stand up and condemn that Christian man for doing that? And well, of course, Christian leaders did condemn him, but of course, he wasn't a Christian. First of all, he's a Freemason, and second of all, he's actually a Christian in the same exact way that Richard Dawkins is a Christian. Because when you read what he actually had to say, it's just like Dawkins claiming that even though he's an atheist or an agnostic or whatever he wants to term himself nowadays, he does see the value in the strength that a Christian template, as it were, gives to the culture. So he's a cultural Christian, which is exactly what Richard Dawkins has stated of himself, that he is a cultural Christian. All right, so that this article kind of unravels this sort of sordid and somewhat complicated issue. So that's the EPOCH update. Giving it to you really succinctly and fast, since I'm driving somewhere and my destination is soon arrived. So